thanks everyone for making time to join us, and thank you, SCC, for this opportunity to present the webinar for our members. We hope it proves helpful. So we understand everyone is really busy, and because of the lack of time, we tend to neglect many areas in our lives, from not spending enough time with our loved ones to looking after our well-being. One of the most important yet common challenges includes making time for personal investments. So let's get started with a small survey to know how many of you have started your investment journey. It seems like quite a number of you have already started, and I'm sure just like myself, you would be able to relate being guilty at times, for delaying making certain investment decisions. When the decisions do take place, however, it can often be ad hoc. Perhaps you're just talking to a friend and his or her strategy seems to be working out, so you decided to do the same. And when the hesitation takes place, it is due to a feeling that financial planning requires financial knowledge, which either means taking a lot of time to research or really understanding what you've read, but it's not entirely true. Which is why today we've brought together a unique panel to have a discussion and help you. Furthermore, to help you get started easily, we're offering a special partnership offer with SCCA, whereby when you sign up and invest with us this month and let our relationship manager know, you will get 50% off management fees to the end of this year. So here's a little background about us, Kristal.AI, who's hosting the webinar today. We have a wide range of investments for accredited investors, from award-winning funds to alternative and impact investments and private equity. Some of our past pre-IPO deals include Grab, Udemy, and more. For everyday investors, we have over 200 ETFs curated to sector themes and algorithm-managed portfolios. So that means that these investment portfolios will be automatically rebalanced to help you get started and manage investments very easily. So the business started in 2016. We're licensed and regulated by MAS in Singapore, SFC in Hong Kong, and SEBI in India. We accept clients from almost all over the world, so even if you relocate one day, we will still be able to service you. All right, so let's begin with an introduction of our panelists who will be sharing their personal investment journey with you today. We have Damayanti and Evelyn, who are lawyers by profession, and Thomas, who is the head of trading and portfolio management at Kristal.AI. Evelyn grew up in Malaysia and has spent the past 10 years studying and working in Singapore. She considers herself relatively inexperienced and fairly lazy in investing. That's why intelligent investment platforms like Kristal do the trick for her. As a philosophy, she believes that she's only a steward, not the owner of her money, tasked with responsibly managing this so as to not burden others when she gets older, and so that she can bless as many people as often as possible. Damayanti is an experienced investor and entrepreneur with an illustrious compliance and legal career. She is currently based in Singapore and previously based in the US and India. An active supporter in the social impact space, Damayanti has co-founded a philanthropy initiative that supports women. How does she make time out of her busy schedule to manage personal finances? Having to juggle multiple roles between being an entrepreneur, CEO, and mother to her lovely 9-year-old daughter, Damayanti will share her knowledge on achieving financial wellness. Lastly, the head of trading and advisory, Thomas brings his 25 years of experience in boutique fund houses and big names like the Bank of Austria and JP Morgan to Kristal.AI. He is an experienced finance professional in trading across multiple asset classes and risk management. Just a disclaimer, the views that Damayanti and Evelyn share in this webinar are of their own views and are not legal advice nor investment advice and are not representative of the firms that they are working in. Yeah. So when it comes to investing, it is often the first step that takes the most coaxing and consideration. Fortunately, our panelists will be able to share how they begin their investment journey as well as any setbacks or challenges that they faced. We can start off by asking Evelyn, when did you start making an investment plan for yourself?
I first started work in 2014. And at that time, there were a few financial planners, financial advisors who were asking me to start thinking about these things. But because I was generally quite lazy and I was really busy in my career at that point of time, I delayed it for about 3 or 4 years until maybe 2017. Yeah, so that's when I started looking at things seriously.
Thank you, Evelyn. And what about you, Damayanti? You have been working for many years, and how did you decide when to take certain investment decisions based on the life stage that you were in?
Thanks, Hilda. Thanks to SCCA as well as Kristal for the invitation to be here and to share my personal sort of journey. It's always great to be amongst lawyers, so it feels like I'm at home at the moment. Just to sort of respond to your question, Hilda, and I think Evelyn actually has done a great thing of starting very young. In my case, I did not start investing until I was much older. And I think there were certain life events which actually triggered or caused me to start thinking about financial wellness at my personal level, at the level of my family, and then also in relation to my professional decisions. And they were essentially my having become a parent when I became a mom. And then soon after having decided to become an entrepreneur and sort of leaving the security of a steady salary. So that was a very risky professional decision. I am very happy about it now because it has worked out well. But when I took it, it was frightening in many ways. And so I think for me, these critical life decisions resulted in me taking a long and hard look as to how I'd like to have some financial security now and into the future, so that it gives me choices and provides a cushion at the relevant time. And agreeing with Evelyn prevents me from becoming a burden on others.
Thank you, Damayanti. And for Thomas, you're probably the most experienced finance person we have in this room. So you spent 2 decades in banks like JP Morgan. And what are some of the highlights and key steps you took when you got started?
Yeah, thanks very much for that. I have indeed started early on my investment journey. So I would say it's more of a sheer coincidence that when the movie Wall Street was released, I was just 15 years old. And that is about the first time when I got interested in investing. Back then it was more on the paper trading mode. And it was more a learning process for me as well. And it helped me to understand the linkage between what's happening in a share price versus what is happening in the broader economy. And that has been a very fascinating subject for me. And I was lucky enough to turn that interest into a profession and have been involved in investing ever since that young age, basically. Of course, I've learned lessons the hard way, and I've definitely made a lot of mistakes in my past as well. And this is also something that everybody needs to be prepared to do. That's certain thing. It will not always go right. I don't know any trader who wins 100% of their trades. So the important thing is how to deal with adversity and how to gather that knowledge to deal with these adverse situations. And also just to share one of the highlights as well, going to that topic, in my time in JP Morgan, I was responsible to manage the credit portfolio for the investment bank in the Asia Pacific region. And this portfolio consisted of the loan portfolio and the counterparty risk portfolio. So counterparty risk is basically when a bank does trade with another bank and is owed a lot of money or owes the other bank a lot of money. There's actually a way to actively manage that risk and trade that. And I started that in 2007. So just before the global financial crisis. And I've been through this adversity of seeing Bear Stearns, hedge funds defaulting, Lehman's defaulting, etc. And I think that is the most treasured experience that I had in my life. Going through that helps me to to see a lot of other situations as they happen today in a different light and with a different approach to that.
Thanks, Thomas. So, for Damayanti, you are a lawyer from the best law school in India. When it comes to investments, did you feel you need to learn about financial product knowledge when making investment decisions?
Absolutely, Hilda. I think at the end of the day, most of my career as a lawyer was as a transactions lawyer, both in Singapore and in New York. As much as I was drafting prospectuses, for bonds and IPOs, etc., I think when you think about it from the perspective of your own personal monies and what you want to put it into, there is a need to gain some knowledge. Now, I don't have a financial background in that sense because I've been a lawyer and now a compliance consultant. But I think there was a need for me to sort of embrace this whole learning journey. And what does it mean? What are these products that are in front of me and which ones should I be choosing? So an effort was made to learn more about the products, both from the perspective of reading, speaking with the right people, speaking with relevant financial advisors, etc. But I think the advantage that I had as a lawyer was that I was from the same space, or albeit in a legal capacity, the ability to understand terms and conditions, and I think the ability to ask questions. So that was a hugely powerful set of tools that got me on that path of trying to understand what are these various creatures. They were products for some, but for those of us who are not really inducted in them, they're just like any new thing, right? And so there was a need, there was an effort to understand and ask questions. And I think, perhaps when you're as old as I am, you don't feel shy to ask questions that might even sound silly, when perhaps my younger self may have been a little bit embarrassed to ask. So yes, in short, the need to understand through various modes, traditional studying, asking questions, talking to friends and family who might know a little bit about this and getting their candid views were all part of my sort of process in trying to understand products better.
Thanks for sharing, Damayanti. And what about you, Evelyn? Are you familiar with investment terms such as volatility, risk-reward ratio, or diversification? What has your experience been like with these terms?
Thanks for that question. Yes, in the course of learning, as Damayanti said, I became a bit more familiar with these terms. So, for example, volatility just means markets go up and down for various geopolitical, economic, social, and other factors. Risk-reward ratio, I traditionally understand it as most investments are either high risk, high reward, low risk, low reward. So basically, if you are willing to take greater risks, that is a greater risk that the investment might go up and down, but there's also a greater risk that the space in which you'll go up, the percentage in which you'll go up is high, and conversely, low risk, low reward. If anyone is aware of extremely low risk but extremely high risk, high reward investments, please let me know. I would love to look into those. So yeah, that was my understanding of risk reward ratio. And for diversification, I understood it as generally, and that's very intuitive to me as a lawyer, because we deal with risk and we always want to diversify and we always want to hedge and manage that risk. So I understand it as diversifying by region. For example, the regions you invest in, US, Europe, China, things like that. You diversify also by your asset class. So relatively safe investments like bonds versus riskier investments like cryptocurrency. Yeah. You also diversify by choosing perhaps different, it's related to asset classes, but you may choose based on different risk levels if you want to spread out how much exposure you have. And you may also diversify by sector. So for example, healthcare, tech versus like ships and commodities and things like that. Yeah.
Thanks, Evelyn. And for Thomas, do you feel it's important to know the basics of investing, and how does one go about starting their journey?
Yes, I do think that it is important to have some basic knowledge, or at least operate under the acknowledgement. In boxing, you say, don't try to punch above your weight. Don't invest only in things that you understand. I like what Damayanti said, the ability to ask questions and the ability to understand from with a person with legal background, especially in the investment world, is often very helpful. And I've been reading through a lot of prospectuses that you have maybe drafted in the past. So it took me also a lot of time to learn and understand that as well. So that was my learning journey. The good news, however, is that these days, in this day and age, it is very easy to have access to a vast amount of information to help you for the journey, whether it is through various YouTube channels, whether it is online webinars like this here today, for example. And one of our philosophies at Kristal as well, we want to make investment hassle-free and easy. And that's why we have, if we go back on Hilda's introduction, like different investments for different types of clients, as they feel comfortable to go along with. Yeah. I don't think a degree is necessary to finance, and it really depends also on the time that is available. And I think that's also important that when it comes to investing, that it should be rather simple products if you have very little time to follow to it, whereas it can be more sophisticated, of course, if more time is spent and more background is acquired. But investing is a journey. Yeah. So you learn as you go along, and therefore I think there's no questions that should not be asked or that cannot be asked to help you to understand what's happening in a portfolio, why might something be better than another thing, how to build diversification, etc. So these are all very important questions to be asked and experiences to be made, and that's something that gets acquired along the way.
Thank you all, for sharing your experience. It was great to hear, how you all of you started with your investment journey. And now I would love to know from our audience, and after hearing what our panelists have shared, do you feel it's possible to invest if one does not have a lot of time to do research? I just launched the poll. The results are going really good. Most people are, saying yes. That's great. Okay, I'll end the poll in a few seconds. 80%, very interesting results. I mean, the whole purpose, of this webinar is really to help to inspire some confidence, by listening to actual people, their personal experience, right? So in fact, just last year in 2020, we saw that the pandemic inspired many to get started with their investment journey. If there's any good thing about the lockdown, it is really having the time to reflect on what's important and what you need to do more of. Just stop sharing the results. Yeah. So lockdown has helped many young adults and working professionals take action to get closer to financial freedom. And as you get started on this journey, you should also take note that planning should be done for the long run, right? Because the length of your plan can determine the breadth of your success. You work towards your short and long-term financial goals and meet those targets, whether it concerns the financial security or growing your wealth. You must be aware and manage your resources to get your money working for you. So, we invite panelists to share with us some strategies that they have taken to prepare for long-term investments. Starting from Thomas, maybe you'd like to share what are some of the investment tools or good practices that helped you with your investments?
Well, maybe I start first with the good practices. I think for me, the first golden rule for investment is start early. Yeah, there's never. It's the longer. I think it was Buffett who said it's not the timing that counts, it's the time in the market that counts. Yeah. So as we see from long-term investment results, timing is less important than the time in the market. So starting early, having a plan, and even if it is just a small amount that is set aside on a regular basis, and let that work for you, is definitely going to help you achieve goals sooner than that. And the second, I think the second good or pillar of a sound investment strategy is diversification. And that is something that comes in step 2. As you learn more about investments, then diversification means that there are different investments that behave or give different returns under different market environments and certain economic circumstances. And diversifying an equity portfolio into different companies, not putting all eggs into one basket, and adjusting that diversification to current changes. Like at the moment, everybody is concerned about inflation, and there is a big shift in interest rates, big pressure for interest rates to go higher, which is hurting bond positions. That is something that is, I think, also important. Important thing on a long-term investment plan, to have a diversification, to be prepared for different scenarios. And the third one is more on a personal side, is to be disciplined. Like, have an investment plan and stick to the plan, and maintain a good discipline, a good investment hygiene. That's also with regards to emotions. Emotions play a big role when it comes to investments, because it involves your money, and that's where tools like advisory algorithms that we are applying for some of our strategies and client portfolios, and that are purely looking at it from a quantitative perspective, help to remove this factor of emotion, which can sometimes be detrimental to investment outcomes and the discipline of investors.
Thanks, Thomas, for sharing. Damayanti or Evelyn, would you like to go next? Yeah.
Oh, I can just sort of chime in with a few things in addition to what Thomas said. I think the scenario planning that he mentioned is important, in that sometimes you just don't know what that scenario is going to be for you and your family and your aims in life, right? I never thought I would be an entrepreneur. I never thought I'd leave an employment. And for me, the other thing that developed over the years is a certain desire for a legacy, which had a community impact angle. So that would mean an element of philanthropy as well. So it varies for everybody, that scenario analysis. But I would say sometimes just let your imagination run wild, because it's going to be very hard for you to say what you're going to need in today's standards. So it's important for you, therefore, to plan for your financial security and freedom, because you could think very differently 10 years from now, and having the options which come with some kind of financial security is tremendous. And then the other two things that I would say is, and this I guess anyone would say when it comes to advising, a close friend even on their financial safety net, is definitely remember that most products are high risk, as Evelyn said, and the whole concept of the principal being guaranteed and protected is, these are really things of the past. So it's your hard-earned money, and you have to make sure that you're comfortable going down a certain route, because there will be times when the portfolio will stress, and you're going to have to withstand that. So again, it becomes critical that with that hard-earned money, you think through what are the essential items, whether it's your rent or your fees or whatever else, your school fees or whatever else you're planning for. And that should really be kept away from any kind of an investment, in my view. Plus, you should cushion into a certain number of months, or however you want to plan it into the future, should there be a shock or a challenge in your life which sort of needs you suddenly to have liquidity. So I would advise that. I would tell a friend that as well before they decided on any kind of financial products. But ultimately, if you have that sort of a net of liquidity, whatever that might mean for you, or you can consult your financial advisors, and Thomas, I'm sure, has good views on that. But once you've sort of kept that safe and liquid, then you probably have the ability to go into the markets, which come with the risks that Evelyn mentioned. So I would add that to Thomas's comments.
Yeah, I think those are very helpful points from Damayanti and Thomas, because I'm not sure of the age profile of the people I'm speaking to here, but I remember when I first started, it was very important to get some basic things like insurance, and I think an emergency fund, like Damayanti said, set aside. So anything in addition to that, I can consider investing. But if I don't have that basic level of emergency fund, or if I don't have that basic plan of in roughly at this life stage, do I need some big pockets, big buckets of money? And if I don't have that big picture, then it's very difficult to start investing. So once you've got some of the basics in place, and once you have a rough sense of when the big buckets are going to come in your life, and I think what's really helpful is to have a philosophy. So, and I know that we all think that we are short on time, and most of the time we are, but it pays to set aside some time at the start. It may be a bit heavy loaded at the front, but it pays to set some time at the start just to get a good sense of yourself. You know, what age are you at? What are your goals? What is your risk appetite? Are you an active or passive investor? Are there things you will clearly stay clear of, and why? Are there things like philanthropy that Damayanti mentioned that you are clearly interested in, and why? And then you can, and that sort of philosophy sets you up to do your research on your options based on the above. And then I think very importantly, do some trial and error with amounts that you're comfortable with. And gradually, as Thomas said, because it's a learning journey, you can increase them as you feel more confident. As your research, it's a learning journey. So your research is, it builds on each other, and it can sometimes be exponential. So just take the steps that you're comfortable with, even as you learn. Yeah.
I also wanted to add on to that, because about research, there's one thing, and that's a big debate in the market as well at the moment, between active investment versus passive investments. Yeah? And I would say that depending on what Evelyn said, it's really, you also have the possibility to just stay on this level one, on this passive investment, and see it as a steady growth. I mean, this is ultimately what's happening in CPF funds as well, to a certain extent managed by the government, to that extent that they provide this passive amount of income over time, and the purpose of growing it over time. And that's equally fine.
Thank you, everyone. I guess, yeah, what Evelyn mentioned is quite valid for our next question. You know, we get to really understand our audience. Like, as a busy professional, do you prefer actively managing your portfolio or hands-off investing, or at this stage, you know, you are still not sure? Okay, we'll wait for a few more seconds for everyone to have a vote. Okay, the majority of our audience actually would go for hands-off investing. Right. So I guess, like, you know, we could just do a Q&A. I know there are like quite a few of you here, and you have listened through to what our panelists would have advised, you know, how they got started. And if there are any questions that you would want to know for your own investments, if you already have, I know the majority of you have started. So, you know, we have 3 very different profiles here, and I'm sure they can give you some insights as well. So feel free to ask any questions. Yeah, but meanwhile, I will just start off with a few of my questions, which I think will benefit myself as well as everyone else here. So in this increasingly volatile market, how would you create a diversified portfolio that can weather the volatility? Like, how does your diversified portfolio look like? This can give me some idea. And feel free to pick this question up, whether it's Thomas, Evelyn, or Damayanti. Yeah, feel free to share.
Yeah, I'm happy to start with that, just to get out of the gates here. Because I also mentioned diversification earlier on. So there's a multitude of, whether it's scientific approaches to that, and you can take a quantitative approach to that. And we're using that a lot through our advisory algorithm that is built to do exactly that. But there's also sometimes very simple rules to that. So I recall a conversation with a trader that's many years ago. I was still living in Austria back then, and he said his simple golden rule is his asset allocation is changing, and he's using an asset allocation of the number of hundreds minus his age. That's basically his asset allocation in equities. So that means as a 20-year-old, he invested in equities. As he grows older, 50, 60, then the equity portion reduces, and of course, therefore, it's ultimately becoming a lower risk or portfolio that is lesser exposed to sharp drawdown. So there's multiple answers to that question. Now, for me personally, I think we're currently living in an environment where the world has changed for all of us in last year, thanks to COVID, one way or the other. And I think it has also changed in the investment world a fair bit. We have never seen so much monetary stimulus and fiscal stimulus at the same time. And one of the themes that I'm focused on personally is the preservation of wealth, looking for assets that are a bit more remote from the impact of inflationary pressures. And that's, I'm expressing that through equity, you can find companies which are thriving in such an environment, or sectors who are thriving in such an environment, but also in assets that are more related to or considered as a store of value and maintaining the purchasing power of that. So there's definitely that part of the asset allocation plays a role in my portfolio. And I have increased that over the last year to some extent, but that's just my very personal experience that I want to share.
Yep. Thanks for sharing, Thomas. I guess the next relevant question, right, which was I thought it was very interesting that you brought up the age factor and that how you compared lowering equities. So now what percentage of income, right, would you recommend saving and investing, right, for better long-term wealth management? I think this would be an interesting question for all panelists, because I would like to say if you have different risk appetite likely, and in different age consideration, different life goals as well. So maybe each of you could share a little bit about how either you are managing or you would recommend.
Damayanti, do you want to take that question? You had a very good approach that you mentioned for yourself.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm the right person to be saying this, but just my personal sort of view or current view. As I said, this changes. It's very personal. It's very dynamic. It will change at different ages and stages of your life. Ironically, even though I think I'm much older than all the panelists, I think I feel more able to take risk at this age than perhaps when I was younger, and when you would have told me that, oh, you've got your whole life ahead of you to make it up, or just wait for another 2 cycles or whatever and you'll be fine. So it is very bespoke, this element of how much and how you should divide up between keeping yourself liquid, as I mentioned earlier, and then the rest of it going into a certain portfolio, which again has to match, like one of the panelists said, your outlook. You know, are you looking for growth, or are you looking for a supplement to your income, or are you planning for your kids' university, or are you planning for your parents' senior years when you want to look after them, or philanthropy, or whatever. And honestly, although I am someone who plans, like all of us good lawyers are, I also think that you have to be ready to change this very dynamically, because things will happen that you don't expect, and you will change, you know, over time as well, so that your idea of how you want to divide up your financial planning will also evolve. So like I was saying, for me, I always want to feel that I have the liquidity to do what it takes for the essentials in my realm of how I see life, or my responsibilities, whomever they may be too. But beyond that, I feel I'm able to take a fairly robust and a fairly, I won't say aggressive, but more than, I think, moderate view that, you know, I think I can dive into some risky investments. Of course, I can't do that for all. I certainly need to make sure there's a balance even there, but perhaps a little bit more of a risk-taking appetite now in my sort of grayer hair years. And I will say this also, that for everybody making this decision, the one of the messages I'd like to leave with everyone, it is, as I said, very personal, very dynamic. So whatever you hear, whether it's through your reading, through your advisors, through your friends and family, you really have to bring this home to yourself, your family, who you're responsible for, your plans for legacy, your ambitions. You know, some of you may want to do something very different in a while, and what does that mean for you? And so the power lies in you. And so it all comes right back to your independent decision making as to which way you'd like to cut that portfolio. I mean, I've just told you how I think now. Ask me 5 years later and you may get a different response.
Yep. Thanks, Damayanti. Evelyn, would you like to, share any thoughts?
I think Damayanti has covered a lot of it. I think I would just add that, especially if you're starting from scratch, and I remember when I was starting from scratch, it wasn't that long ago for me, it's helpful to talk to people. I found that one of the most helpful things, and just not to be afraid to ask questions. I find it helpful to read financial blogs, and I find it helpful to, as I said, talk to people and just bounce their views off each other as well. And I think that Thomas said just get started, because when I look back, I actually found it a lot more fun than I thought I would. Yeah, so I actually found it a lot more fun to research on all these new areas. And if you're a lawyer, because the world is so intertwined, it will also help your practice. So there are a lot of these practical benefits as well. So, I mean, if there's anything you remember from the seminar, it's to get started and not to be afraid to take a trial and error approach at times. Yeah.
Thanks, Evelyn.
One thing that I want to chime in there, and maybe just to share my approach as well, is like I've always done it. I mean, the initial question was how much of your income should you save? I've been taking the approach that I always have also been working it backwards, in a sense, to say, I remember when I was saving for my first property that I bought, I was kind of like, I knew this is the amount that I would need in X amount of years, and how much do I need to get to that space, and how can I supplement that with investing, the returns on investing to get to that point. And that had driven the amount of my disposable income at that point in time, which I said, okay, I'm going to invest this with an objective to achieve a 5 to 7% return, for example. Yeah. So it can be done from both approaches, but I also agree with what Damayanti said. One of the most prized and most precious assets that anybody can have in their portfolio is liquidity. Liquidity to help you in unforeseen circumstances, but also liquidity to grasp opportunities as they arise. Like if you think back just a year ago, pretty much same time of the year as it is right now, if you would have had liquid assets that you can liquidate and shift it into more risky assets in March, at the end of March 2020, performance would have been fantastic. That's kind of like goes into asset allocation, into diversification, to maintain a liquid portion in the portfolio that you're able to access and that you're able to shift into opportunities as and when they arise.
And sort of just to close the loop on that, with what Thomas said, which I do agree with, is ultimately don't rely on the portfolio for a sudden need, because at that point it may not be ready or ripe for liquidation, and you don't want to be coming out at a loss because you haven't had that liquidity to take care of a certain event that maybe it was unexpected, but you still just kept a cushion. Because I think if you do it otherwise, there can be a lot of stress, right? You're suddenly having to go into a portfolio that's down, liquidated, even if it's possible. There may be some gates to redemption, lockups, etc. So always make sure that financial planning is actually financial well-being as much as possible. It doesn't add to more layers of stress into a very busy schedule. So I would say exactly what the other panelists have said: be ready to hold through a few cycles, maybe.
Yeah, I think like to also address some of the relevant questions that our audience have asked, and I thought really reflects well to what your views have been, right, is basically dollar cost averaging, right? And is it a good strategy, and where should he or she invest this strategy in? I think that comes to having some liquidity so that you dollar cost average in, right? And then the other questions would be, how do you select a manager for hands-off investing? So I think maybe in this aspect, Evelyn, she is currently a client of Kristal.AI. Maybe you can share a bit about how your experience with using Kristal has been, if you have tried out the dollar cost averaging function here, and also like what are some of the considerations you did when you're choosing the robot investment platform, right?
Okay, so there are two questions. One is whether DCA, dollar cost averaging, is a good strategy. And two is, how do you select a manager if you want to do hands-off investing? I think there's no simple answer, because for number one, because you'll have to do your own research. Actually, there's quite a lot of debate online on whether dollar cost averaging or lump sum investing is the better one. But I would say that most people, especially if you are starting out, don't have the capital to do lump sum investing. And so dollar cost averaging makes a lot of sense, because you can set aside, say, X% of your salary and put that in your spread out portfolio over every month. And that helps you, especially if you're starting out, because you don't have a lot of money, and also because you may not be willing to, you're not confident to park a whole lump sum into, say, something that you've not tried before. Yeah, so the second question is how you would select a manager for hands-off investing. Again, there's no easy way around it. You just have, I'm afraid you might just have to do some research. And some of the key considerations you want to look out for are you looking for an active or a passive fund manager? An active management means they may be switching things up quite a bit, and you'll probably be paying higher management fees as well. Whereas if it's a more passive investment, there are usually lower management fees. And you have to bear in mind that the more you pay in fees, the more your portfolio shrinks. Yeah, so one good thing about Kristal is that their fees are usually very, very, it can be zero, and otherwise it's very low. And if you're really starting out, what I did was I did trial and error with a few, and I monitored the results. I saw which ones were good. I did some along the way, and yeah, I just kept a few. And Kristal is definitely one of them.
Yeah, thanks, Evelyn. What about you, Damayanti? Would you like to, chip in? I would like to think like because you're more experienced, you might be more, interested in managing your own investments in like brokers. But do you also use robo-advisors, for some like passive hands-off investing?
Yeah, I think I think Evelyn has answered that really well. So I think the angle at which I will come is in some just sort of keep your finger on the pulse, right? Technology is disrupting the financial services industry. We read about it every day if we were inclined to read those pages of the newspaper. And you can see it even as somebody who consults in the regulatory space. You see it in the regulatory trends as well, right? In terms of the regulators in various nations supporting fintech or techfin, depending on how you look at it. So I think the sort of the role that technology and robo-advisory is an example of that is playing in the financial services space is only increasing. And I think in my view, and of course make your own views on this, that trend is going to rise and continue. So you will probably find this becoming more mainstream, and front runners who are already in, perhaps like Kristal, who will have the experience ahead of others. The other thing to keep in mind here is that there are one hears, I mean, I'm definitely not somebody who knows exactly what how the computer algorithms work, and I'm sure Thomas will be able to speak to that if needed. But what I will say is that one of the things I've heard in through the lens of robo-advisors or those who have chosen to have quant modes of financial services is that the algorithms bring an element of neutrality in the event of a terrible up or a terrible downturn in the markets, for example, or even a very high upswing. And so they're able to mitigate, or I guess in some ways, do something that humans can't, i.e. operate without emotion. Now, I'm not saying that that's the way that every financial decision needs to go, but there is something to be said about being able to weather a storm stoically and look more at the investment for what it is than the panic that comes in when you're a human being, right? And so I do think that the time of robo-advisors and quant funds and technology's role in finance is going to rise. And I think there's going to be good reason for it, because it brings something to the table that technology is allowing us to have and see that perhaps we didn't when we didn't have access to technology. Not to say for a second that the human talent is not needed. So Thomas, people like you are very much needed as well.
Yeah, thanks, Damayanti. I thought that was a very comprehensive answer and well said, Evelyn, Damayanti. Right, so I guess like coming from a personal experience as well, I did explore like different types of robo investment platform, right? And in the end, I stuck with Kristal because it gives me that flexibility, to customize and choose. I could also use the algorithm, which generates me like a personalized portfolio, because I will get to put in my age, how much I want to get started with, and what is my risk appetite. And then it shows me this list of, personalized ETFs, right, that I can then read up further. So it's like instead of stepping into this universe of thousands ETFs and picking and choosing which is better, which is not, what am I investing into, I get like a shortlisted ETF to just find out if I actually want to invest. Then next is, in Kristal, we actually have this algorithm managed portfolios, which means Thomas and the algorithm would actually rebalance, the holding. So what it makes us different, and I guess in very short summary, like what is it that we do? We provide both like expertise in passive investing and also like active investing. Yeah. So I hope that answered all. Thomas, would you have anything you want to, add in?
Yeah, so I mean, in my role at Kristal, as Hilda said in the introduction, I'm heading the trading and asset management department for Kristal, leading also an investment committee. So I'm therefore very focused on our in-house strategies for accredited investors. I'm managing 2 strategies. We also have our Kristal Founders Fund, which is a hedge fund, which is managed by our founder CEO Ashish, together with our analyst team. And what we try to do is, because we're trying to be, we have a very good fund offering on our platform as well. What we are doing here is we're calling ourselves a tech-enabled platform. So technology, going back to Damayanti, which has been saying, is like technology is our daily bread and butter, and it's making us better investors on a daily basis, and better providing us and our clients with very good returns through that, by having like the human machine interface to optimize any investment outcome that we have. So these are the key cornerstones of our philosophy that we have, and where we are trying to excel. When it comes to selecting Roboadvisors, just to go back on the other question, I think it's really important also to build that trust, and do you get that offering that you need, and do you get the right attention for your investments? That's kind of like the key, and of course the performance is also important, because there's a different sophistication that is falling in here. So I think from our perspective, I'm spending a lot of time on our fund strategies and so forth. That's definitely a different offering that's going way beyond the Roboadvisor. Yeah, and therefore that's helping us to provide the returns that we have in the past.
Yeah, thanks, Thomas. So I guess we'd like to have one last question for all the panelists here. In terms of advice, what is the one thing you would tell the younger version of yourself?
I would say start earlier, and it's actually a lot more fun than you thought. Yeah.
I'll say half definitely of what Evelyn said, start earlier. And I'll say take a leap of faith. Ultimately, it's never going to be perfect, and it's a bit of a gamble, but it does need that leap of faith, and it's better to take it than not.
How about you, Thomas?
Well, when I go for the investments aspect of that, I would say I would tell myself to be more patient. And I always say that again, from a personal anecdote, when I was very young, my best trade of my life was I bought Apple stock when it was at $7. My worst trade of my life was I sold it at 21. So be more patient, and patience is a very important trait when it comes to investment.
Okay, thank you, Thomas. We don't have any more questions from all the audience, but I would like to invite everyone to don't be shy, and feel free to drop us like an email, whether you want to talk to Thomas directly, or you like to actually learn more from Damayanti or Evelyn, or just have a chat, make a friend. We can connect you guys together. And I'm sure the panelists, including myself, we had a very good time getting to learn about where your journey with personal finances are at. The more we stay connected and know your thoughts, the better our advice can get. So do talk to your trusting advisors if you already have one, and ask them to help you review your portfolio and investments. If you'd like to know more about investing, from Kristal.AI, our relationship manager will immediately assist you the minute you sign up. So this assistance is absolutely free, no strings attached, and it is really just to help you get started easily. Right. Again, same as the panelists, I would strongly encourage everyone to take the first step if you haven't. Especially when there is this partnership with SCA, we are offering the promotion for everybody who signed up. And yeah, you can scan the QR code or just go to the website and sign up.
Hey, Hilda, can we take a Zoom selfie before we end?
Yeah, sure. No, I got it.
And then one thing I also wanted to say, thanks very much for organizing that, and Damayanti and Evelyn, thank you so much for your time. It was really great to meet you over Zoom. I hope it is in person in the not too distant future. And for everybody else, for our attendees, thanks as well for making the time. Investment is not scary. Yeah, there's nothing to be afraid of. And also for people with a very busy schedule, I think we have solutions that cater for both needs, for those which are more do-it-yourself, as well as for those clients which are more on the hands-off sides. So I would be very much looking forward to talk with some of you in the future.
Okay, everyone please smile. Just like, thanks. Okay. Great, thanks. Awesome. All right, thanks everyone for joining us tonight, and we look forward to having you again, whether it's for our own Kristal hosted webinar or a next series with SCCA. Yep, thanks. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much,
Thank
Thank you,
everyone.
everyone. Thanks. Bye.